Hello and welcome to the Wander Women's Collective podcast. I am your host, Gracie Hins, and as always, I am so psyched that you are here and listening in today. Today, we have a super fun episode with Maddy Nutt, and she is a pro gravel cyclist. So it was pretty fun getting to just hear about how she ended up getting into gravel cycling. And if you're like, Gracie, what even is gravel cycling? It's kind of like a bit of a cross between road biking and mountain biking, and it's fast and fun. And she was just in one of the biggest gravel races really in the world. There's or at least the biggest gravel race in Europe, which is the Traka 360. And I was over in Spain watching the whole thing unfold. And so it was super sick just getting to watch her race and be there and just kind of understand it all a little bit more. So yeah, we kind of just dive into her journey and we debrief the race a little bit. And yeah, she's just an incredible human and it was really fun getting to chat with her. Also, in other Wander news, we are going to be doing Wander events. And I am so psyched because Wander events have kind of been a little bit of a brainstorm, or they've been in the back of my mind for a long time. And I'm just a huge proponent of getting more women outside, especially in adventure sports. I think, there's a lot of different ways that you can be inspired, but there is really something about being at an event and meeting other like-minded women and being able to facilitate that space and place for women to meet is a really exciting idea for me. So yeah, one of our first events is actually going to be the Leavenworth Trail Fest in Washington, which is very near and dear to my heart. My grandparents lived in Leavenworth for most of the years of my life, and so I grew up going over there, and I'm super psyched. There's going to be a rad group of ladies leading a quick little shakeout run before the Leavenworth Trail Fest 27K and 55K. So yeah, if you happen to be a Washington listener of the podcast, you should come over. It'll be May 23rd, and then we'll be just hanging around the race on the 24th. So yeah, that's Wander news. Big things coming. Super psyched on it. And then we'll also be at Unbound Gravel, which is kind of wild. And that's in a couple of weeks after Leavenworth Trail Fest. So if you happen to be a gravel cyclist or a runner, events coming soon to you. But yeah, also, once again, if you could this podcast, that would be epic. Those views and the likes, they go a long ways. So yeah, without further ado, here is today's episode. I hope that you like it, and I hope that everybody has a wonderful week.
Well, my first question that I always love to ask everybody is, who are you and what do you spend your time doing?
So I'm Maddy Nutt and I am a gravel cyclist from London, and I spend most of my time riding a bike. And when I'm not riding a bike, I spend lots of time in the kitchen cooking, although not at the moment because I've only got one functional arm. Um, but yeah, I love food and I love riding bikes, but primarily I'd say riding bikes.
Riding bikes and cooking food. That's a good combination of things. I'm curious. I kind of feel like I'd listen to a couple of other podcasts with you and kind of have a brief understanding of how you got into cycling. But I would love to kind of hear it from you of what was it that got you so hooked to the point where you were like, oh my gosh, I want to spend all of my time doing this.
So I came cycling pretty late. So I was 20 when I bought a bike as an adult. I cycled a bit as a kid. So I used to cycle to school when I was really young. And then I did a little bit of triathlon until I was 11. And then I didn't have a bike until I was 20. And it was kind of a period of time where I was really searching for purpose in my life. At the time, I was I just dropped out of uni and I was waiting to start a new university course, and I was working in London, and I was just looking for something to do with my free time. I had quite a lot of free time, and I my job wasn't giving me any purpose. And yeah, I was kind of hunting for a purpose to life. So I signed up to a triathlon club. I was running and swimming, and I wasn't biking. And then someone offered me to buy their wife's old bike. So then I bought the bike secondhand so that I could just join in on the cycling sessions. And then very quickly I just fell in love with cycling, and I much preferred cycling to running or swimming, and I just found myself riding more and more every week and not wanting to run and swim as much. And I did keep up the running and swimming for a couple of years, but I just I just wanted to spend more and more time on my bike and explore more and more on it. And then yeah, it just kind of became a bit of an obsession, and it's gone quite deep since then to the point where I'm racing full time. Um, but yeah, I did just love it. Like pretty early on, I just loved riding.
What was the first race that you signed up for?
I signed up for a half Ironman when I got the bike as
Oh,
a
wow.
kind of challenge. So
Mm-hmm.
I was doing it for completion rather than to be competitive. So it
Mm-hmm.
was like a challenge, and I'd only ridden that distance on a bike once before the actual race, and I did 6 cafe stops. So in a half Ironman, it's like 90K, and I did one ride that was like 100 with 6 cafe stops, which is crazy. Like thinking about now, like I can do like a 200K ride with no stops, or like I did a
Mm-hmm.
300K race with no stops. But
Mm-hmm.
like the fact that a 90, like I was really like 90K was really scary for me. But yeah, I got around it. I got around the half Ironman. And then my first bike race would have been a couple of years later, maybe, or maybe a year later. I signed up to like, I did a local crit, and I
Mm-hmm.
got dropped maybe the first, like, I think I did a lap and then I got dropped. Maybe 2 laps. Maybe I did 2 laps and then I got dropped, which is mad now thinking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, like thinking that. But yeah, I definitely got dropped. And I think anyway, like everyone gets dropped in their first race, I'm sure. Um, and then my first gravel race was Grinduro 2019. So
Okay.
just before COVID, I didn't have a gravel bike, but someone made me do Grinduro with them. I didn't want to do it, and I
Mm-hmm.
borrowed a bike. It was super heavy. It was like a steel gravel bike, and
Oh
I
my
remember
gosh.
crying because
Yeah.
it was like really. It was like time sections. So Grinduro is like enduro style, but gravel. So it's like time sections, and the last section was like really technical routes, and I'd never ridden off road before, and I just remember crying because it was so scary. But the prizes for like the podium were saddles in like bronze,
Okay.
silver, gold. I
Yeah.
came third. I joked like, oh, if I get a podium, and this was like in the non-pro category, this was like the age group category. But I
Yeah.
was like, oh, if I get a podium for age group, I'll have to buy a bike for the saddle. And then I came third, so I used like all the money I earned over summer to buy a gravel bike. And that's how I
Oh my
started gravel
gosh.
biking.
You just said that you'd like never ridden gravel before that? Like,
No,
oh
I've
my
never ridden off
gosh.
road.
Yeah.
And I got convinced to do this race, and I just did it. Yeah.
And then how did the like transition from like not loving gravel at all to then just going like full into it kind of come about?
So after then, I obviously bought the bike and I started riding, and then COVID happened. And during COVID, I just started riding basically a mixture of road and gravel, but like
Mhm.
I was riding my bike every day for hours. And one of my
Mhm.
friends who was living nearby, because I moved back home for COVID, so I had one friend who lived nearby who also had a gravel bike. So we would just go and like I would follow their line and like
Mhm.
practice riding off road. And I just started building my confidence more and more and started enjoying it more and more. And I think it's one of those things where when you build the technical skill, it becomes more fun. Like now I absolutely love riding off road, like much prefer to riding
Mhm.
like riding gravel to road. Um, but yeah, I remember at the time it like just took ages for me to kind of build up that technical skill. But yeah, it was definitely COVID, just riding lots and lots over COVID. And then post COVID, I did a couple of like actual gravel races, so like mass start gravel races.
Mhm.
Um, and I did Grinduro again and I won the age cat. And that's when I was then like, okay, I really like this gravel racing thing.
And I feel like the COVID part of that like makes so much sense too. And like even kind of like what you were saying at the beginning too, of just like having something to like give you purpose, where I do feel like being on a bike and having a sport just gives you like so much purpose and drive. Because were you still working during that whole period, or were you kind of like starting?
So COVID, I was back at university, so I
Okay.
was studying, but all of my lectures and everything were online. So what I would do is every morning I would wake up, I'd plot a route on Strava, probably about 6 to 8 hours. I'd go ride my bike, I'd come back, shower, eat, and then I'd watch my lectures, and I just did that on repeat for like the whole of COVID. Um, And then post like that COVID lockdown, my university, because I was at university in London, it just became entirely online. So I
Okay.
literally just did online uni until the end, and I basically used that as an opportunity to train my
Okay.
like training. So I got really fit in my final year of uni because I was basically just doing that every like training in the morning and then watching lectures in the afternoon.
Hmm.
It was like super easy to train around online uni. But yeah, definitely. I think COVID cycling gave me, because cycling was so fine. I was out in the middle of nowhere cycling on my own, and it gave me like such a thing to keep me going through that period that was like so strange. I
Hmm.
almost quite enjoyed that period of time. Like a
No,
lot of people complain about it,
yes.
and I loved it. Like I would run as well. I was running as well at the time, and I actually swam in a lake and I swam in the river, and like I loved not having to socialize.
Hmm. No, I think for the people that like had that and like had something that they were able to do similar to that, like I think it was like the best period of time ever because like that was the same thing for me. I was actually like living in San Diego doing school, and I remember it was like the first, I think it was my sophomore year, and so I like my freshman year I hadn't been a surfer at all, and then it was like during COVID that I was like, oh my gosh, like I should really put myself and like see how good I can get at surfing. And like it was the exact same thing where it was like I would like wake up and like do my little online lecture and then I would literally go surf the entire day. And I think it was also because it was just at that like beginning stage of a bit of an obsession that like I was literally able to spend like all day just like in the water surfing and then I'd like come back and like do a class and then I'd like go drive back to the beach. And it just ended up being like this beautiful time that like I was able to just like dive into a hobby that does take a lot of time and dedication to like feel like super confident at it. I think also similarly like with socializing, I was like pretty psyched to just like have a really small social group and then just be able to like do whatever the heck else I wanted. So, yeah.
Totally. I feel like we felt less social pressure because there was nothing going on. And then
Yeah.
afterwards, I feel like people were less intense socially, and you felt like you didn't have to do as much. And I actually really enjoyed the like in COVID in the UK, the rules for a lot of it was you could ride with one other person or you could ride with someone from your household. And then it was you can ride with one other person. And I actually loved that because there was no like working out group rides, and you always rode with one friend and you would just rotate who that one friend was, and you could just like really chat to someone because it was just the two of you. And like yeah, it was just, I actually think it was such a nice time. And if someone asked to ride, you'd be like, oh, sorry, I'm riding with that person that day, but I'll ride with you another day. And you just like change each day who you were riding with.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it was super, super nice. And the roads were like empty of cars. So like in London, training is really, really hard. But it was
Hmm.
actually really during COVID because there were way less people on the roads.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense too. Well, and because are you in London right now too?
Yeah, I'm based in London now.
Yeah. Do you spend a lot of time training in London or do you, I mean, you're traveling constantly with like races and things too, I imagine, but like, do you end up spending part of your year somewhere else training?
Yeah, I try and not spend much time training in London. I'll spend like a few days there, but it's not somewhere that's a great training base. Like in winter last year, I was in Girona for 3 months on and
Okay.
off. So I try a lot of the time. So like this year I went to Chile for 3 weeks where I
Hmm.
had a race in the middle week. And like before I trained for a week and after I trained for a week at altitude. And I'll try and do things like that. So I'm racing in Kenya in June and I'm going out for like a week of altitude before the race. So in
Hmm.
the end I'll be only 4 weeks, but it means that I'm also not training in London for those
Hmm.
4 weeks.
That no, I feel like that's the way to do it too, because then it's like you don't have to be there for like a huge, massive stint, but kind of keeping it to that like, okay, like a week before the race, a week after the race, and then be able to like go home and refresh and relax. Okay, wait, so then you go from like going during COVID to then like now you're doing like you're like fully in it all the time. I feel like I need a little bit more of the context of like how did you end up kind of making the decision of like, okay, this is something I love to like this is something that like I want this to be everything in my life.
So I think like during COVID, I just loved it. And then after that, I started racing again because I'd done like a couple of races before COVID, but like not much. And I'd got quite a lot fitter with the like 6 to 8 hour rides every day over COVID. So I was
I will
like,
do it.
it would do it.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a coach at the time. So like I'd never done any structured training. I just rode my bike all the time. So I was like,
Hmm.
oh, maybe I'll get a coach. Maybe I'll start. And this would have been 2021. I was like, oh, I'll get a coach. I'll start training. And I got into like a local club team and I rode for them. So just like a local team. Um, and I started racing for them, did like some road racing, and then did a couple of gravel races. And off the back of that, I applied to like an it was a multi-discipline, so like you could do multiple, you could do like road and gravel
Okay.
UK team that was like non-professional, unpaid but sponsored. So like I'd get
Mhm.
bikes, I'd get kit, they'd pay for a lot of my racing. Um, we went on like a team camp to Spain and stuff like that. So I applied to that and I started a full-time job at an investment bank in the summer before. So like the summer of it have been 2021. Yeah, the
Mhm.
summer of 2021. Um, and I did that for like 5 months, nearly 6 months. And I was like super miserable in that job. So I was working 12 hours every day minimum,
Oh gosh.
not riding apart from the commute, riding my bike on the weekend, but like constantly I was sick because I was so overworked and like run down. And like I was riding whenever I could, and then I was sick because I just didn't have any downtime at all. And then I got the offer from this team, and it definitely wasn't justified to quit the job I had to join this team because this was like a local unpaid non-professional cycling team. But at the time, I was just like like I want to say miserable. I was quite miserable in what I was doing, and I needed a break from it. And this was an opportunity to kind of like give cycling a bit more of a go and then like see if I could progress it further. So yeah, I resigned from the job, which a lot of people were like, "Are you sure you want to resign from that job?" Um, because it was like a pretty hard job to get. And then I yeah, I went on a tutoring job to the Maldives for like a month
Mhm.
as like right off the back of leaving that job. And then I came back, started training. And yeah, I did that team. And to make a living, because that team wasn't paying me, I tutored online. So I studied maths at uni and like
Mhm.
was a really good mathematician as a kid, and it's something that I actually quite enjoy teaching maths, and it comes quite
Mhm.
naturally to me. So I'd always taught maths from when I was like 18. I'd always like taught maths online as like some extra money. So I just went back to doing that so I could afford to live by like I actually did quite a lot of work in that year. I don't think many people knew at the time, but I
Mhm.
was sometimes like 8 hours a day and like training around the tutoring because I like needed to earn enough money to like live.
Mhm.
Um, but so that I could be in that team and like give that a go. And then in that first year, I did the world champs. So that year was the year of the first gravel world champs. And I
Okay.
came,
Yeah.
I think I came like 29th. So
Mhm.
like it wasn't a huge field that year, but it was like a decent result. And off the back of that and some other results, I was like, oh, I'm actually not too bad at this gravel thing. I didn't do very well on the road. So I was racing road and gravel for this team. And like on the road, I'm not a very good crit racer, and anyone in that team could joke about my poor ability in crits. Um, I just don't have a good sprint at all or good acceleration. But yeah, I had like a good season in gravel on like the grand scheme of things, and was like, do you know what? I want to progress this further. This team's not going to pay me, so why don't I try and like reach out to some sponsors? And I started some conversations to see if I could kind of become a privateer. And
Mhm.
at the time, I want to say like 1,500 followers on Instagram, and I
Mhm.
didn't have a YouTube channel, so it wasn't like I was like pitching myself as an influencer to sponsors at all. I was just like normal size, like anyone with just friends and family following them on Instagram, basically. Maybe a few people following me from my races, and then yeah, pitch myself to sponsors and like set myself up as a privateer for 2022.
Mhm.
Yeah, 2023. Yeah, 2023. With Ribble, which is like a British cycling brand, and then a few other brands as well. And yeah, it's just kind of, I mean, it's take every year I've kind of taken a step up. So like that year I was like earning some money, but it didn't quite cover all my race expenses. And
Right.
then like the next year I was earning enough to cover my race expenses and a little bit of living. And now I'm like, okay, now I'm like living off cycling.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's been like I think a lot of people think it's been pretty fast, and I have like been earning money off cycling for a while, but like actually if you look back, it's like no, it's taken 4 years. Like this is the fourth season that I've been racing. And like the first season, there were races that I was paying out of my personal bank account for.
Hmm.
And like now I'm earning a living out of it, but I have had to work pretty hard, and work part-time up until this year.
Hmm. Well, in like that first year when you were like pitching yourself to these brands, like how did you kind of like feel doing that? Because I feel like that's a really like it's more daunting than you think, especially when it's like you kind of have to like look at yourself and like everything that you're offering and be like, hey guys, like, hey, I have something to offer. And like, I don't know, I feel like it's a weird thing to do, especially like when you're starting out to do it.
Yeah, it's pretty scary, especially like I think then I maybe, I mean, I don't think my value was that high, but I very much don't think I knew my value. And I
Mm-hmm.
think now it's a lot easier for me because I think it's easier for me to quantify my value because I can go like, okay, I've come X position at this position at this race, I've got this much like
Hmm.
engagement on my social media, this many followers. Like it's a lot easier to sell myself to brands, and I'm much more confident in my worth. Whereas then I think I was just like, please, can you give me bikes? Like, is there any chance I can have some money? Yeah, it was definitely, I think a lot of brands then took a chance on me, and they took a chance on like my enthusiasm, and I like made this nice pitch deck, and like the pitch deck was pretty aesthetic and people liked that. And I think I've always been pretty friendly and easy to talk to in terms of like when I chat to brands, I'm definitely not like an arrogant rider or anything like that. And I think brands can kind of tell that, and that I'm like really collaborative and happy to work with them.
Hmm.
So I think it was just going in, just asking and then seeing what I could get, and then each year just building on the year before. And like as I've done that, like my social media following's grown, and like my results have also improved. And like I'm actually like, oh, it's crazy thinking back to like my numbers 4 years ago when I was like, oh, I'll quit this investment banker city job to
Hmm.
become a cyclist or try and make it as a pro cyclist. And then thinking now, and like I couldn't have known then that I would be able to like be so much better. But
Hmm.
I think it was like I kind of felt like I had to make it work to like justify my life decisions. So I've just trained really hard and like worked really hard at it all.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, I do feel like now it's justified, but at the time it definitely wasn't.
Hmm. Well, and I feel like it's kind of one of those things where it's like it's not like fake it till you make it, but there is an element of like fake it till you make it. Of like if you're
Definitely.
and like you do kind of just have to check yourself into the deep water because if you don't put yourself in those uncomfortable positions of like I kind of have to make this work, then like you're probably not gonna make it work as much as you could as like if not as much as on the table and like on the line. Um because it's just like, there's not that extra added stress. And so like having that extra added stress of like, okay, I need to make this work, it really kicks into gear.
Yeah, 100%. I think you do. You're right. It's not necessarily fake it as you make it, fake it to make it, but like you kind of have to like be more confident than you are. Like you have to outwardly be more confident than you actually are in your ability. So like I was doing races that maybe were a bit out of my depth. So like that first year doing like gravel world champs, I was completely out of my depth racing those girls. But like I took the opportunity and I like raced the best that I could. And then it led me to more opportunities further down the line. And I think, yeah,
Hmm.
you do the kind of, and I remember one of the hardest things was like going from the transition of like starting to say like actually no, I'm a pro gravel cyclist, and that was something I found really hard. Is like
Hmm.
actually at a point you have to be start being like no, I am a pro athlete, like I actually am a pro gravel cyclist. And I
Hmm.
think people make some people made comments at the time, and I just like had to commit to it when I was like, right, I'm gonna start doing it. And it like really helped my social media following. Like I added it into a couple of videos and got like a few thousand followers from being like, oh, day in the life of a pro gravel cyclist. But
Oh,
like
interesting.
actually was true because I was earning a living out of cycling. Um, but at the time, I kept thinking like, or people are going to be like, oh, is she actually pro or whatever. Um,
Hmm.
but you kind of have to just commit to it because at the end of the day, like my followers view me as a pro athlete, and a lot of people are like interested in what I'm doing or like what races I'm doing and like want to follow that. And
Hmm.
like, yeah, there's no reason for me not to say that if it
Hmm.
is true.
Hmm. Well, and how has kind of like the social media side of it been for you? Because I feel like it's I like we're in such a weird time too of social media and athletes where it's like you kind of have to be on social media if you are an athlete. But then there's lots of people who are starting more from the social media side and are like, hey, I'm an athlete. And there's a big difference between the two of them. And like you're very much so coming from the like, hey, I'm an athlete. And then you also happen to be like really good and talented and like utilizing the social media side of it.
Yeah, it's such a strange one because I feel like there's a world of, especially like within cycling. I mean, all sport. There's a world of like influencers, and then there's a world of like athletes, and then there's people who are kind of like a hybrid of the two.
Mhm.
And I feel like I've actually built both up at the same time. Like as soon as I started getting brands to sponsor me and I started like racing more and doing bigger races, I was building my social media and I like made a YouTube channel, started making videos. But the brands and the support didn't come from my social media, if that makes sense. And I think
Yeah,
now I definitely get more from brands and they feel like they gain more from me because of my social media. And I feel like I can give them, I can definitely pitch myself stronger to brands because I'm like, you'll get this much exposure
right.
versus if I didn't have the social media. But it definitely is like, I think a lot of the time the following comes from doing certain races and getting certain results as well as doing like creative content.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's such a hard one, especially when like there are people on social media who are like purely influencers, but will be like, "Oh, I'm an athlete." Da, da, da.
And you're like, wait,
Um,
what?
yeah, it is such a hard one, and I like people do. There are people on social media who really annoy me because they do that, and they don't train like a professional athlete,
Hmm.
and I think it's really hard because you just have to self-identify, don't you? Like I would say I identify as an athlete first, and like I don't identify as an influencer, but I accept that I am an influencer, whether I want to be or don't want to be, if that makes sense. But I wouldn't say that that is like what I do. I
Yeah.
do social media and creation, but because I'm an athlete and that's part of my job, I just view it as part of my job. And I know some people don't, and then brands find that hard, and like brands want them to do it more, or they get someone to do it for them. But I actually quite enjoy it. I think it's quite nice. I don't think I'd want to be one of those athletes who just focuses on training, sleep, and food and doesn't have any kind of life outside that. And I think having a social media and like being creative with content is actually quite a nice way to kind of use your brain still. Um, and also engage with other people in the community. Like I actually quite like that having a social media and YouTube means that I actually build more of a community at races and stuff. Like people come
Hmm.
up to me, like be like, "Oh, I watched your YouTube," and then I decided to
Hmm.
start gravel racing or something like that. And I think that's so nice. Like I remember one time I'd had like a period off the bike last year, and someone commented and was like, "Oh, I just went on a ride with like my 10-year-old daughter, and like we were riding along and she was like had made like a little gravel route." And I just think that like the fact that there's like a 10-year-old kid out there who's like riding a gravel bike because they like saw me in a YouTube video, I was like, that is worth it. That is worth
That is
like the
the
hard work that
cutest thing
takes.
ever. And yeah, and it's like it is a small little comments and things from people that you're just like, oh my gosh, like, and I feel like that I imagine that some of that could feel like it goes unseen because it's like, okay, you edit a video and then you post it on Instagram, you post it on YouTube or whatever it is, and it's like, okay, now it's just out into the world. But then when somebody is like actually coming back and like, hey, that like made an impact on me, that's pretty huge.
Yeah, and it's actually like it's quite common that someone will send a message or something, and I always love it when people do. But yeah, I think sometimes you don't appreciate people are influenced by things they see on social media. And yeah, if other like especially if women will get on bikes or like be more confident to like sign up to a gravel race or try gravel because of maybe something they've seen in my content, then that is amazing. That like is only positive if someone like starts cycling or gravel cycling because of something they've seen on my social media.
Hmm. Well, and how do you feel like the women's gravel scene has like grown and changed since you have like gotten into it?
That's such a good question because I feel like I was quite early into it in the sense of like European gravel. I'm not
Yeah.
early into it in terms of like American gravel because obviously that's been going a fair bit longer. But like in the European side of things, I started racing gravel the year before the UCI Gravel World Series. So I
Hmm.
feel like I'm relatively early on. And like that first UCI Gravel World Series, there were barely any women at the races. Like I remember I came like sixth at a couple, and at the time I was so slow. So like coming sixth now would be like insane at UCI gravel race. Like the level has just gone absolutely through the roof. Just like yeah, the density of the field, just the popularity of gravel racing over here has like gone through the ceiling. Like it's insane. Um, it's amazing. Like gravel is absolutely booming, but it is crazy. Like I do sometimes worry that it's getting a little bit too serious and like I'm all for like racing seriously, like and giving it a proper go. But I feel like, say like the Tracker 2 years ago, the Tracker 360 2 years ago, I came fifth firstly. So like the comparison, I came fifth 2 years ago when I literally vomited my way around and I took 16 and a half hours and I I had like no idea what I was doing and I came fifth. We
Uh-huh.
stopped at the third seed. I stopped for about half an hour eating a bowl of rice and like also like vomiting it up, but like
Right.
eating a bowl of rice. I literally had no clue what I was doing. 16 and a half hours. Last year came eighth. This year came seventh. And like I'm a lot stronger this year than I was last year.
Mhm.
But like this year I did it in like 14 hours. The top girls were like 13 hours.
Yeah, they were
13 hours.
fast, fast and
So
serious. It was crazy
like
to watch. Yeah.
speed zones this year, I think some people didn't stop. I think they just grabbed music
Oh,
bags and like
definitely. They're just through there.
and like 2 years ago, only 2 years ago, Sarah had a sit down at the feed. I had a sit down at the feed. Like we had chit chats. Like the whole vibe was entirely different. And I feel like there is a level at which I'm like, okay, fair. Like we're getting faster. We're taking this more seriously. But like we need to. I mean, I saw someone, and this wasn't in the women's race. In the men's race, I saw someone on rollers before the start of the 360. And
Oh,
I just, I was like, no, like this is a 360-kilometer race. Like take those rollers away. Like
yeah.
you do not need to do any extra kilometers.
Yeah.
And we starting the race at an intensity that you need to warm up for.
Hmm.
And there's a point, like there are some UCI gravel races that I've been to that have felt very intense and roady. And like in the sense that like everyone's on the start line on rollers and like people are there with like they're mostly road girls there. And I don't like those kind of races. I don't like races that are too serious. And I do feel like gravel it is becoming a little bit like that, but hopefully it will like when people talk about the spirit of gravel, I'm always like, I really hope that that kind of remains.
I know, and I feel like it's hard because it is like that progression of sport where it's like you have the pro and cons of it, obviously, of like pro, like, yeah, it is getting more competitive and like more people are joining it. But then also, especially like with these sports that I feel like, especially, and like for me, like, I feel like I've seen it, especially like in trail running too. Like, it's kind of interesting looking at like gravel racing and trail running because I feel like it's kind of that same thing where it's like it has gotten so serious. And like, people are just like full sprinting 100-mile races basically where it's just like wait, this used to be something that was just like you stop for 30 minutes, you have your bowl of rice, and like it is really cool to see how much people are pushing themselves. But I think also as somebody that like I mean, like I feel like especially like for me, like I've come into most of the sports that I participate in solely just from kind of like that adventure perspective of like, oh my gosh, like yeah, I want to go run 30 miles out in the woods just 'cause like that's a super sick loop. Or like same with being on the bike. It's like that's a super sick 200-kilometer loop. Like you're getting to see so much cool stuff and like being able to just like take it and like obviously push yourself, but also like be able to enjoy it too, whether that's like stopping for food. But yeah, no, it definitely seems like the seriousness is like ramping up quite a bit.
Is I think it's inevitable as soon as money comes into it. Like,
Yeah,
for example, like the Lifetime series, there's obviously money in that. Now in the Graveler series, there's a bit of money, not much money, but
yeah.
enough to make people start to take things a little bit more seriously. And there's more sponsorship for money. And yeah, as soon as people are making a living out of it, It does. It's inevitably going to become more serious. And I think for me, I just try and choose races and build my calendar around stuff that like is still fun for me to do. So, like for example, migration gravel race in Kenya, you can't have people at the support. Like you can't have support there. You can't have people at the feeds because it's in the middle of nowhere in the Masai Mara. And like we
Mhm.
stop at the feed zones and we fill up our water bottles and we wait until everyone's filled their water bottles up and then we get moving again. Like it's
Mhm.
way more kind of spirit of gravel-esque than say the track has become. So
Mhm.
I just try and stick my calendar more towards those kind of races.
Yeah.
Um, than like the intense UCI one day stuff.
Yeah, no, that I feel like that makes a lot of sense. How do you kind of like go about building the calendar or like the rest of this year? Like, what are you kind of looking at?
So I try and do a mix of like some races that I've done before that I'm like, I want to target that race, but also new races, mainly because I love travel and I'm like, if I can travel. So for example, this year I did a UCI race in Brazil just because I was like, I've never been to Brazil before. I've never been to South America.
Sick. Yeah.
Um, it was so cool. And actually, the race really suited me. Like, it was brutal. It was like pretty technical, brutal. The fact that it was 40 degrees heat does not suit me, but I somehow survived. It was, yeah, it was crazy. But I was just like, do you know what? This year I'm going to choose races that I think I one do well at, but two enjoy and like new travel opportunities. So yeah, Brazil, and then I did this race in Chile, which was just incredible because it was a stage race. So I saw so much. Um, my rest of the year is hopefully going to Unbound. I'm like really worried about my shoulder, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm not riding outside yet, and
Yeah.
the prognosis was a week in a sling and then riding outside, and it's a week like tonight, and I'm nowhere near ready to ride outside. So we'll see what happens. And then Kenya for a UCI race and then migration gravel race. Then I'm going to Iceland for the Rift. Then Iceland again
Oh my
for
gosh.
mountain bike stage race. Then Finland. Then UK national champs, which I might give a good go this year. Like it
Okay.
would be cool to be a national champion, but like the course hasn't suited me the past few years, but it could suit me a little bit better this year. But there are a few strong British girls. And then what else is there? World champs. Oh, I'm doing Gravel Burn, a 7 day stage race in South Africa, end of the year.
Okay. Yeah. See, I feel like gravel truly just does have like the sickest locations that you can like
Yeah, it
it
does.
just has like the coolest and then the fact that it's like all of these cool stage races too, I'm just like, those are sick. I want to go to them. I need to start
Yeah.
signing up.
I honestly think gravel is amazing in terms of the travel opportunities, and that's one of the
Yeah.
reasons why I think I love it over road racing. Like
Yeah.
road racing it just doesn't really excite me, and I don't know whether one at one point in the future I'll give it a go again. But for now, I'm like, I literally get to go and ride in the Masai Mara in Kenya. I get to go and ride like over like volcanic land in Iceland. Why would I want to ride around like Belgium streets when I could do that? Like just yeah, it is pretty awesome. And like I did a stage race in the Sahara Desert in February. Like
Yeah.
how insane.
Yeah.
Uh, I also like the stage racing because it's just it's like a really good challenge to finish. Like everyone is there. Well, like obviously you're competing, but like there are people who are there to like get around every day. And it's so nice to be able to like celebrate those people achieving that. And like yeah, whatever happens, you're kind of like, I did a 5 day stage race across the whatever desert. Like I did one across the Atacama Desert in Chile. And I'm like, that was awesome.
Mhm. Well, and I mean, also you're traveling kind of like with a lot of the same people too, right? Like you're just like you're bumping into all the same people that are competing in these, and like I imagine it switches up a little bit depending on what people are building out their calendars to look like. But the community just seems like it is super solid.
Yeah, it like changes a little bit, but like on the whole, similar, especially kind of races I choose, similar sorts of people go to the same races. And like
Mhm.
I'll also sometimes organize because I'm like a privateer. I obviously don't travel with a team, but I pretty much most of the time have like a friend going to the same race. Like I'll say to like, say for example with Chile, like I chatted to my friend Sarah and I was like, oh, I'm going to this race in Chile. It's a 5-day stage race. You should check it out. I can connect you with the organizer. And then she was like, yeah, dude, I'll come. And like we went together and just had like the best time. She's such great vibes. But I feel like, yeah, you can kind of like build up your own kind of community within the gravel community as well.
Yeah.
Um, and I definitely like center myself around the people who are more chill and better vibes. Like
Mhm.
someone like Sarah Stern, for example, I'll catch up with her at a race, go for like we pre-rode with like another group of people before Traka because she's just such great vibes. And then there are other people I'd be like, nah, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna go to the same races as them or like hang out with them.
Mhm.
I try to like stick with the people who are like good energy around races.
Yeah. Or like they're just people that are taking it too seriously, or is it just like yeah.
Yeah, especially now, I feel like, especially in the past year, there
Yeah.
are just take themselves so unbelievably seriously and like
Yeah.
level of competitiveness. And it's also like, I don't like people who like negatively talk about other people. And I feel like that's starting to creep into gravel a bit. Like, I've always viewed gravel as like not bitchy in the way that I feel like, I don't know actually, because I've not had experience of like road racing at a certain level, but like road racing in the UK scene was really bitchy and I didn't like that. And I don't know whether I don't think it's as bad in like the world tour because I think
Yeah.
people are like, taking their jobs quite seriously. So I don't think it's like that. But like, yeah, I don't have time for that. Like I don't have
It's
time
not
for
worth
people,
it. Yeah. Like,
yeah, like, crap talking other people. I'm like, no, I'm here for a good time. I don't care about your power numbers. I'm like, I'm here to enjoy myself, like enjoy the ride. I don't like, yeah, I don't take myself too seriously, and I really rate people in the gravel community who also don't take themselves too seriously.
yeah. Which are the best vibes to be around.
Yeah, it just makes the race more fun. Like it's only fun if you don't take yourself too seriously and like yeah, take the racing seriously, but like outside of the race, and this is why I love stage racing because most of the time people who go to stage races, they're not that uptight because they're stage racing, especially if it's like in the middle of Kenya. No
Yeah.
one's gonna go and camp if they're like not relatively good vibes. We're like sitting around a campfire after dinner, all chit-chatting, and like yeah, I'm with people I'm racing the next day, but off the bike, we're going to be friends and have a good time. And I think, yeah, there's some people who don't suit that kind of vibe of event.
No, I feel like that makes sense. Well, and I think also too, I'm kind of curious, like, do you feel like there's like the healthy balance of like what you were saying too with like the content creation and the racing piece of it, where like you don't have all of your eggs in one basket. Like you have your racing that you're focused on, but then you also have this other piece of life and like you have other things in life outside of just racing. And do you feel like there's a lot of people that it's like, I am just racing. Like this is it. I don't have anything else going for me.
100%. I know someone who made a comment about how like their like value is on how their cycling is going at the moment, like
Oh
their
God,
value.
that's so
And
sad.
that's so sad. And I'm like, oh my God, my value has nothing to do with my like, yeah, sometimes it gets me down if like I try and do a session and I can't hit the numbers. But then I go and make homemade pasta and I like sit with my fiance and I like don't talk about bikes. And I think for me, it's actually really healthy for me that like I have so many people in my life that aren't cyclists, and that is also why I'm not sure I could live in Girona full time because I think that's one thing about Girona. Girona is amazing, but like the people in Girona, a lot of them, their life is bikes and all their friends are cyclists. Whereas for me, I love bikes and I like a lot of cyclists, but I need other things in my life. Otherwise, I don't think your life can be entirely cycling. But also like when you're injured, for example, exhibit A, me right now, you need to have other things in your life, otherwise you're going to be miserable. And you need to have people in your life, otherwise you're going to be miserable as well. And also like cycling careers don't last forever. Like any professional sport career is never going to last that long
Mhm.
because you only reach like you reach a certain age and you're not competitive anymore. So like I think it's also it's not insurance, but like I'm doing other stuff so that when I decide that I don't want to race anymore, I actually have something I can do and I'm not going to sit there and suddenly go, "Oh my God, what am I meant to do with my life now?" Like
Yeah.
I feel like it's important to kind of not spread yourself more, but just like do other things so that like you have something that you can do afterwards. And I guess it's
Mhm.
different if you're like a professional world tour road cyclist because then like you're earning enough money that I don't think you need to worry that much about like
Yeah, you
retirement.
retire and then that's it. You're done. You never have to do anything else in your life.
Earn enough
Yeah.
to work. Whereas like maybe less so for women, but
Yeah.
like gravel, like when I stop cycling or like if I want to have a baby, I'm not gonna have a maternity contract. So like
Yeah.
I have to think about how I'm gonna earn money beyond cycling. And I think that is also part of it with social media and content creation that like I'm building potentially a career for after cycling.
Does your fiance cycle?
Absolutely not.
How does she feel about that?
Like, absolutely not. But then the other day, we went to this race in the UK and she saw these people doing so that this race had like three distances. It had a 65, a 130, and a 200. I had to do the 200.
Hmm.
Um, she saw people doing the 65 and she was suddenly so inspired. She was like, these people were having the time of their lives getting around that 65. Like they were stopping at all the feeds. There was like
Hmm.
a where like if you found a balloon, then you get a prize. So loads of them were like riding around with balloons tied to their bikes. And she was suddenly like, maybe I should ride a bike. We've been together for like over 4 years. You've seen me ride bikes almost every single day of those 4 years, and you've never felt inspired. And suddenly
Yeah.
you're saying, and I mean, it does make sense because those people are having an absolute blast. But it's so funny that she now is like, oh, maybe I'll ride bikes.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Does she do the travel with you?
Only sometimes, not
Okay.
that often. She came to Traka, and she's gonna come to Iceland, I think. But yeah, not every time, just because like she does have her own life as well, which is important.
Mhm.
But yeah, but like when it works and like when I can afford to bring her out, I do.
Yeah. Well, and like, how do you kind of feel like you balance the travel and like at home time right now?
I find it quite hard to be honest. I think it's quite hard to like spend enough time at home, like with this kind of level of racing. But I
Hmm.
have kind of made a plan that I'm going to be racing quite a lot this year. I'll probably race a decent amount next year. And then I'm going to be more strategic with my racing and do something like I might look at doing like the Lifetime series, for example,
Hmm.
or just be more strategic and say, like, actually, do you know what? I'm going to race like 8 times in a year, but I'm going to like train towards each of those races. Whereas at the
Okay.
moment, I just like race every other weekend all year.
That's a lot.
It is, but I really want to develop, like, I want to develop my skills. I want to develop my like
Yeah.
race experience, my tactics. I want to give my sponsors that exposure and like
Right.
build my audience, like build like it's great exposure racing all the time. And like it's great for like meeting those people in the cycling community. So I'm like,
Yeah.
whilst I'm like I'm 27, like I'm pretty young. I think this is the time to like do that. And then
Hmm.
when I want to settle more, I can like choose less races and be more strategic rather than like just do everything.
Hmm. Well, and also, you know what? You can try out all of them right now, and then you'll
Yeah.
have all of your favorite ones. And then you can like,
Exactly. And then I'll be like, I love the Rift. I'm gonna focus on that.
right. Wait, have you done the Rift before?
Yeah, I actually did do it 2 years ago. It was pretty cool.
It looks insane. Like the landscape of it looks insane. Yeah.
It's insane. Like you're literally basically riding on Mars. You're
Yeah.
like, am I in on Earth right now? This is amazing.
Hmm. Well, and how many people are like in a race like the Rift?
Ooh, there's got to be over 1,000 at the Rift. I
Oh,
actually not.
seriously?
Yeah,
Wow.
feel
Okay.
like that's a good number. Um, yeah, the Rift's pretty big. It's not as big as like Unbound or Tracker, but it's like up there.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense too, I guess, because it's also like perfect time of the year to like be there and it's not too terribly hard to travel to, I guess.
And there's no nighttime.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's yeah, no, that's pretty crazy. Yeah.
It's so crazy. It doesn't get dark. Like from experience, it does not get dark. I went for a wee at 3 in the morning and it was light.
I'm curious, at the Traka, I feel like there were like multiple comments around like the top women and the amateur men's team, like, and like just fighting. Not fighting, but just like,
Oh no,
there
there
were,
was fight. Okay, the fighting between the men and the women. So Firstly, I would say like I love Gerard and I love Class Mark, and they really gave it a go giving us separate races, and I respect them for that. They did slightly mess up the way that they did it. So it
Okay.
was pro men, 10 minutes, pro women, 10 minutes open. So like men
Okay.
and women open.
Yeah.
Now, I would say not entirely their fault. I would say partly our fault. As pro women, you would expect us to be faster than the open. I would say on the whole. Now, we pootled the first 3 hours. Like we didn't go that fast. We were like,
Yeah.
and I'd say that's the dynamic of a women's only start. And they maybe didn't know that that was going to happen. Like I personally didn't predict that. I thought we'd start harder than we did.
Okay.
And I think no one really wanted to like make a move because it's a 360-kilometer race. But
Yeah.
I was expecting some of the girls to want to shake down the group and like form like a more select group earlier on. And after the first loose descent, there was actually only 7 of us. And I was like, brilliant, I've made the 7. Like this is, I know all these girls. These girls are
Hmm.
all to ride with. Um, they're all really strong. They're girls I'd expect to be at the front. Let's go. But no one kind of did anything. And I was actually thinking, like, should I go and like kick a little bit? But I just wasn't confident enough to at the time.
Hmm.
On reflection, I definitely should have done because like that could have made a big difference to my race personally. But yeah, I think
This could have meant no shoulder injury.
yeah, it could have been no shoulder injury because the girl who took me out wasn't in that group. But basically, was in that group and none of us did anything. So I think it was partly our fault in the sense that if we'd have raced competitively from the gun and like pushed the pace a bit more, we would have stayed ahead of the open men. But because we
Mhm.
were racing, and I also think there's a level of did those open men self-select themselves as open rather than pro? Because there were some men in that open field who I feel like should have been in the pro men.
Oh,
And like
interesting. Yeah.
yeah. And if they've put themselves in the open, why are they racing through the women and like affecting our race and
Right.
getting up with us? Because what happened was like groups of men would start to come past. And like the first few, we were like, okay, girls, get out the way, let them go. Like
Yeah.
these men are like, properly racing, like get out the way. So we all got out the way and like let them go. But then it got to a point where it was like these men were like passing us to overtake us, but then would slow down in front of us. And then we couldn't race
Mhm.
because if you're gonna then attack as a woman, you're gonna end up in the back of a bunch of men. And there was a no
Yeah.
drafting. So it became really awkward. And like at one point we got really mixed up with a group of men. Some people went the wrong way. There was a lot of shouting between the men and the women. And then like we kept just getting mixed up in between and there was a lot of arguing. Like I heard a lot of women being like, get out of our race and stuff like that. Which to be fair, they're in the open. Like I think if you're in the open category and you've chosen to be in the open
This
category
is
and there's like
true.
a pro category, you should
Yeah.
kind like my view is respect the pro category and like let them have their race.
Yeah.
Like if you wanted to be in the pro category, race in the pro men's. Um, but yeah, it was getting a bit like heated at points. And like I just tried whenever a man got in my way, I'd be like, on your right, or something like that. And I'd always say thank you. I'd be like, thanks, like on your right, thanks. At one point, one guy didn't move, and it's in my YouTube video, and I'm just like, hey. But like I didn't personally have many fights with men, but there was like some like to and fro between some women and some guys. But yeah, it was really awkward. And then later on in the race, so actually there was, and Sarah Stern wrote about this in her post, and
Yeah,
I
that's what I was reading.
so yeah, so she said that at one point the women's field broke, so a moped broke down on the course,
Yeah.
splitting the women's field. I was just behind it. And like basically it split the women apart, but some of Sarah was also behind it, but a few of us managed to make it back. And I managed to make it back. And I did see a couple of girls on men's wheels at points when they were making it back. I like actively didn't sit on men's wheels. Like I found it
Yeah.
was really difficult because there were men everywhere. So like to be fair to those women, it was really difficult.
Yeah.
Like I was like hopping over and it was a double track. So like you literally had to like hop to avoid wheels. And I do think there was maybe a level of women getting on men's wheels to get back to that front group. And then we didn't all get back together, but there was like a bigger group of us together. Um, but I think later in the race, I suspect some women did draft just because of the way certain gaps were closed.
Yeah.
Like I like a big gap on certain people who then like appeared not that far behind me. And like
Yeah.
I know like a woman I was with then made it quite far forward. And like she actually, to be fair, I think legitimately she probably didn't draft because there was a really hilly section. But yeah, there's some situations where I'm like, I mean, we don't know and you can't tell. And like
Yeah. It's the
you
nuance of
just
it.
have to trust. Yeah, you just have to trust that people didn't draft. And like it was really frustrating. I hit like a flat section. There was a 90-kilometer flat section and I was on my own. And I'd been on my own for a long time. And like groups of men would come past and they like pass you and you see this bunch and then they'd slow down, but you can't draft them. So you then have to slow down. So
Yeah.
I was so much of the time I was having to slow down because of men, because I didn't want to be seen as drafting them. So I'd have to like slow
Right.
down and then like hang off the back of them and be like, come on,
Yeah.
guys, at the pace. But you
Yeah.
can't do anything. So yeah, it was really frustrating. And like I had an argument with the girl who crashed in front of me because so I was riding with Heather Jackson after the climb that kind of separated the group out. There were six girls up the road, and then it was me and Heather. And then
Yeah.
this girl caught me and Heather, but she caught us in a group of men. And like
Okay.
Heather was like, that's a big group of men. And then like this woman arrived. And I was like, suspicious. And like these men, this other group of men had been sitting on me and Heather for like however far. And we'd just been like, yeah, you can sit on us, but like we're not drafting you, but you can sit behind us if you want. And the woman had a go at me and was like, I just saw you drafting. And I was like, sorry, they were behind us. I don't know how we're drafting them. And you just appeared in a big group of men. Um, and then she crashed, so and took me out. So it didn't really end well for either of us in that situation. But yeah, like I think people did draft or like at least a little bit. And in all honesty, I think we just need to have races on separate days because I don't see like if we started behind the open men, then we would just be flying through them unless we started like super slow and like
Yeah.
gave them a couple of hours to get some distance, but we would just be spending our race going through them. So like unless the gaps are so much bigger or unless we push the pace from the start, I can't really see an alternative unless we just race on different days. But it
Yeah.
is really frustrating. And what I find frustrating about it the most is it's like the front men never have this. Like, what front men ever
Yeah.
have
No,
racing?
I mean, this conversation wouldn't be happening, period. It just doesn't exist. But yeah, no, I think that's an interesting, like, yeah, it does seem like it's like you really would just have to do different days, which then
Days, like
makes it
champs.
complicated for people that are organizing. But it's like, if you want
Although
to,
I say that about world champs because we start separate from the elite men, but every world champs I've done has
yeah.
been affected by masters men.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
People drafting the men. So
Yeah.
like last year, like oh my God, world champs last year, there was such blatant drafting of men. Like right towards the finish, a group of 10 women came on a group of men's wheels, and I
Yeah.
shouted at them. I was like, stop drafting the men, and they just ignored me and sat on their wheels.
Hmm.
So annoying.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's just like, just be authentic. Just like do it right.
I know. And it's one of those things. Do you know what? World champs was annoying because like actually there was no rule against drafting. So like
Mm.
in theory, they weren't doing something wrong. And like I find it frustrating because I'm like, you shouldn't be using men in the race. Especially if you've been dropped. Like if you've been dropped and then you're caught by a masters man, like a group of masters men, and then you sit on them to catch the woman that dropped you. I just don't think that's cool. But equally, people would say, well, it wasn't against the rules. So it's really hard. I think we just need to have like really clear rules and then also separate races.
Well, and I mean, are there any races that they do just like fully, like with large races like this, like Unbound Traka? Like, I mean, is there a world in which they do different days or like, is that not?
It's a good question. Well,
I'm like, I
Unbound,
can't think of
yes,
anything
they
right off.
are separate. Unbound this year is the first year that there's a non-drafting between categories rule, or maybe it was
Okay.
last. Um, the Rift last year there was a no drafting between categories, but people were drafting between categories. They started separately. It's just I think it's so hard for people. The problem is you can't monitor it. Like there's
Hmm.
not enough people on course monitoring it, and
Hmm.
like how would you monitor it? it's so hard to monitor. You just have to like trust people, and like people in a race situation do things that they probably shouldn't do. Like they're competitive and then it gets the better of them and they draft.
Yeah. Yep. The fun.
Yeah. But yeah, I think like Sarah was frustrated and like a fair few people were frustrated. It's annoying. I don't think it affected the first few riders. I actually think, to be fair, I think the first like maybe not the top 10, but I think the first few unaffected by drafting. I think the top 10 was affected by drafting, but not so much that it's like we need to kick up a fuss about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Good
But
stuff.
I think lower down, I've heard horrific drafting.
Yeah, you get like you get
You
like
get
10
down to
below and
20th
you're
and
just like,
people were like drafting
oh
the whole
gosh.
race.
Yeah. No, I would not want to even like start thinking about that. Yeah. Because it's just like, yeah, no.
I guess people at that point are like, well, I'm not racing for podiums. So
Yeah,
like,
that's what I was gonna say. I feel like that's a much easier like mental hurdle to hop of like, oh, it just doesn't really matter at this point.
yeah, but it does for the people like I had a friend who like lost a fair few positions to women who passed her in groups of men. And she
Yeah.
was like, I wanted to race honestly and I didn't draft. She was like, but it's really frustrating because I'm trying my best. And then like there are women who are sitting on men's wheels all day beating me. And that's where it's like, it isn't cool, but I can completely see why a woman who's like, this race is going to take me 17 hours. I might as well sit on a man's wheel and it takes 16. And I can
Mhm.
see why they would then do that.
Do you have anything to leave people with today? Any thoughts, opinions, life epiphanies,
This is a good
vadas that
question.
keep you going?
Yeah, my biggest thing would be that I always treat myself to nice coffees and nice baked goods when I train, and I feel like everyone should, and no one is too serious or too pro to stop and have and I would say like when you're training properly, you do this after your training, but like the simple joy of a really nice coffee and a really good baked good, you should all like that should everyone should validate that as something to do with their lives.
I think that's the most perfect way to end this.
Once again, thank you so much for listening in today. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. I'm also just psyched to just keep watching Maddy ride bikes. It's funny, I feel like I've never been somebody that follows traditional sports, but I am ever so mildly glued to my phone when there's like a big trail event or bike race happening. So I'm pretty psyched to just keep continuing to see what Maddy does because I feel like she's just gonna absolutely crush it. So yeah, I hope that everybody has a wonderful rest of their week. And if you could give us a review on Spotify or wherever it is that you listen in, that would be absolutely incredible. And okay, that's it. Have an epic week.